What does it mean to have free will? Probably not exactly what you think it means. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. This week I'm talking about predestination and the often asked question, are we predestined or do we have free will? Many people believe it's an either or, a binary choice. Either we're predestined or we have free will. But as I suggested yesterday, predestination doesn't imply that we don't have free will. The problem here is twofold. First of all, many people misunderstand what predestination is. And second, people also misunderstand what it means to have free will. Tomorrow I'll talk more about what predestination is. For today, though, I want to talk about free will. And what a topic. Understand that this is a subject philosophers far smarter than I have been debating for millennia. So don't expect my brief take on it to be in any way, shape, or form the final or definitive word on the subject. I take it that what we commonly mean by free will is the power to choose. It has to do with agency, of being agents who are capable of deciding and acting on our decisions. And of course, this is the basis of criminal justice. We are responsible for our choices and can be held accountable for the choices we make and for the things we do. There are, of course, a few people, a very few, who believe in a highly deterministic understanding of human agency in which nearly all of our choices are controlled by a combination of genetics and external forces, but very few of us subscribe to this understanding. On the other hand, it doesn't take much imagination to realize that it is often the case that the choices we make are, at a minimum, somewhat influenced by other forces. Peer pressure and group mentality come to mind here. We often think we're making free and independent choices, but the reality is the choices of other people often have a huge impact on our own choices. And it is also true that there are choices that are simply beyond our ability to make. For example, I can stand on the top of a tall building and proclaim to all the world that I am free to fly. But the realities of my human physiology and gravity conspire to make this freedom an illusion. Jump, and I am virtually certain to have a very rude awakening to the limits of my freedom. Yes, I could strap on a parachute or hook myself up to a hang glider, but that's not what I mean by having the ability to fly and the ability to choose freely to fly. There are simply things that we are incapable of doing, choices that we are simply incapable of making because of a whole host of limitations. And yet, people don't usually think of these things as an infringement on their free will. The Apostle Paul recognized this very thing with respect to sin. In the 7th chapter of Romans, he writes, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am of the flesh, sold into slavery under sin. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. But in fact, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Now if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do what is good, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inmost self, but I see in my members another law at war with the law of my mind, making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will rescue me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord." In one sense, we are free not to sin. but you know the reality is quite different. As hard as we try always to do the right thing, we often find ourselves doing the very thing we do not want to do. Is this an infringement on our free will? You can see then that free will isn't absolute. It has limitations, boundaries. There are things we are not capable of choosing, and there are influences on our choices that we often do not acknowledge or sometimes even recognize. So where does that leave us? We do have free will, but it is not unlimited or unqualified. We are limited by our human capabilities. We are shaped by outside forces. It is free will that is exercised within certain boundaries, but it is free will nonetheless. When we return tomorrow, we'll take a look at what predestination is, and as importantly, what it isn't. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.